going live, and I'm live once again. Going a little bit earlier today. Yeah, I almost completely missed it because I was doing something else. And well, hello there. How are you? I hope you're good. Um, and today's topic is a pretty big one. So if you're just joining, if you're not aware of what's going on this week, and you don't even know who I am, my name is Aaron Cloutier. I am a music instructor, musician, producer. You know, everything that one must do in today's music industry to make a living at it, that sort of thing. So I am it's day 3 now of what's going to be a 2-week period of doing a live stream a day based on a lot of feedback that I've received from just reaching out on social media, asking people, hey, what's your biggest frustration when it comes to songwriting? And though there was a lot of diversity in the answers, um, there were enough common topics to kind of center all around together into specific categories. So I wanted to do just that. So for this week, the rest of it, as well as next week, I'm going to be tackling a new topic every day. So I try to keep these about 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes. I tend to be a little ranty. So if you cannot stay for the whole live stream, if you're just catching this and being like, yeah, this would be cool, but I'll see it later, there will be a replay. And also, I've put together a series of PDFs that kind of go more in depth with each subject. And you can find that in the link in the description. So if you want to grab that, feel free. It um, hopefully will serve as a nice complement to what I'm saying here. But so far, we've talked about lyrics. Um, Yesterday was melody, and today I thought I would just jump on the whole topic of inspiration. And I mean, it's an interesting thing. I got a lot of different types of answers from people, and let's see. I've spent all morning scribbling this to prepare the PDF for this because it's not quite ready yet, but it will be after this goes out. So yeah, basically just things centering around writer's block, self-doubt, um, procrastination, not feeling motivated. There's one in particular that really hit home for me. There's this one gentleman who is struggling with creative motivation. He said, I'm 32 and I currently have 3 original songs, right? So, but it's all centered around inspiration and motivation or lack thereof, apathy, self doubt. And I've definitely experienced all of those things. So, um, just to address the first topic here, creative motivation. I'm 32 and currently have 3 original songs. I mean, this might be for a lengthier conversation, but if he and I, if you're watching, by the way, if you and I were in a private coaching call together, right, and we were just hashing all this sort of stuff out, I think the first couple of questions I would have would be, what does your schedule look like? What does your setup look like? Like, what does your actual like creative environment look like? And do you even have one? That sort of stuff. Um, it's kind of, it's a huge subject to kind of, tackle, and everybody's different. So that's why I offer private one-on-one coaching to kind of get to the heart of the matter and see what I can do to help people on an individual level. But that said, I'm going to try to address this topic in a very general way with some specific exercises that you can do as well. So let us go with that. So, yeah. So if the problem is motivation, right? And it's so funny because I was just listening to a podcast from one of, my musical heroes, Devin Townsend, and he was actually talking about this too, where he used to think, and I agree with this too because I felt the same way, and I'm sure you will as well, but he used to think that, if he was inspired, then he would be motivated to create, right? He would be motivated to take action. So in his mind, he thought the sequence went inspiration, motivation, then action. When in actuality, it's the exact opposite. It's more like you have to start with taking an action which will prompt the motivation, which will then lead to eventually uncovering this like the subconscious kind of creative spontaneity that allows for inspiration to occur. So, and this is kind of like the heart of all things writer's block, right? Like when you have writer's block, there's an expectation there to do something that you feel like you can't do, right? So starting with just eliminating that expectation, right? And I'm gonna pull actually from something specific in a little. Actually, I'll get to that in a second. But the first thing that you can try to do is explore one of any number of like creative prompts, right? Because I mentioned this the other day on a previous live stream, but basically you feel like you're blocked up because you're in your own head about the thing that you're trying to achieve, right? You're too much in your own mind about it, and you need to get back to a place that is more intuitive and again, spontaneous and creative. So, it's been referred to as a stream of consciousness, right? Where you just start working on something and all of a sudden you get into like the zone or you get into a flow state. And that's what I think of when anybody ever mentions inspiration, right? Just all of a sudden, like this bolt of lightning hits you, and then you're just rushing to the notepad or to your guitar, and just like, I have to get this out. Like this is, I have to trap this idea, right? That's where we all want to get to that point. And I believe that there are ways that you can consciously trigger that. So, as an example, right? Let's take a look at a couple of different creative prompts. And the main thing here is that like we're not trying to achieve a specific outcome with this creative prompt other than to kind of get out of our own way, kind of take an outside I can't talk today, an outside perspective on the piece that we're working on, and then just kind of allow things to kind of snowball from there if they do, you know. And again, it's about not having a specific outcome right now. This is the stage where we're starting with nothing, right? So it's more about curiosity than it is expectation. I hope that makes sense. So for example, and this is like a tried and true trick that I like to go to all the time just because it feels the most natural to me. But anyway, um start by just writing a riff using 4 notes, right? It could be from any scale. I tend to like using the pentatonic scale because it's a type of scale that lends itself to creating melody easily anyway. So it's already imposed a limitation of like there's only 5 notes in this scale. And then, a great way to expand on that limitation would be like, all right, let's use only 4 out of 5 notes out of this scale. And then from there, you just can start exploring different ways, different note combinations, different octaves, different techniques that you could use. Like maybe if I slide into this note from that note, or maybe if I string skip, or maybe if I bend up into that note, or if I repeat notes, that sort of thing. Like right off the bat, there's a ton of different options that you could do. I think I played some in yesterday's live stream if you want to check that out. It wasn't the most graceful, but hopefully you'll get the idea. um, but there's one example, but it's not just limited to the instrument, right? Another way is just exposing yourself to different types of, you know, stimulus. Whether it's like culturally, like going to a museum or a movie theater or reading a book or poetry or any other kind of art form like painting, um pottery, anything like that, anything that kind of take you out of the mindset of like, oh, I have to write a song that sounds like X band, or I have to write a song that draws from these specific influences. You never know what can happen if you just kind of like shift your mindset to something that's completely outside of it. It might lead to something completely different, but I think that's a good thing, right? Because even still, it's an exercise. And the more that you start doing this and start trusting in it, you develop a confidence in yourself about what to write and how to do it. And there's just less anxiety about, oh God, I hope I don't get writer's block. You'll have a confidence that's built up from doing all these types of things. But as far as like some extra creative prompts, like I think I've mentioned these many times, but for good reason. Um, This is one that I personally need to try out myself, so I'm a little bit of a hypocrite for not doing this one yet, but I totally intend to. You could just take a picture of, you know, a landscape of some sort. Maybe you're out in nature and yeah, you catch like a sunrise or a sunset or something like that and take a picture of it. Okay, so what would that sound like? What would the soundtrack be to this little, scene, right? It's a maybe a different way of thinking than you're used to. It certainly is a different way of thinking than I would think, right? But that is the point. It's to take you out of your current mindset and look at things from a different perspective. You're bound to discover something new. And if you can find even just one little thing from this exercise, then that's a huge win, right? And that's the main thing that I'm trying to go for when I'm trying to, you know, go past something like break through a creative rut or whatever it is. I'm trying to go for like the quick wins, whatever they're going to be, just little small victories. You know what I mean? Just something that is easily doable and achievable and doesn't take up my entire day either. It can just be this little prompt that gives me an idea that I can save for later and then return to. Um, so yeah. And then there's other things of like, imagine you're writing a scene for a movie, right? Even like go as far as like storyboarding it if you want to, and then be like, well, now you have to write the soundtrack for that scene. What would that sound like? Or, even from the perspective of being a guitar player, I'm left-handed, and anytime I would go over to a friend's house, everybody I knew was right-handed, so they're right-handed guitar players. I never learned how to play right-handed because I just never got the memo. I grew up in a small town. But what's cool is that whenever I would go to a friend's house and like pick up the guitar and flip it upside down and just start like fiddling around with it, I would discover different types of chord voicings that I never would have found out on my own with just, my left-handed guitar. So that actually helped me to write songs in a certain sense because I was trying to figure out, I think I was trying to learn how to play the only thing I think I could figure out playing on an upside down acoustic guitar was Wish You Were Here from Incubus. I think that's what it was at the time. And it forced me to just like figure out and use my ear to find out like the most comfortable way to play a chord that sounded like one of the chords in that song, which turned out to be a completely new shape, which then I applied later on in other things. So that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't, completely flipped a guitar upside down and just like see like, all right, how do we figure this out? It's just not something that I would normally do. But it can also be applied to different instruments, right? Like if you're a guitar player, to pick up a bass. If you know are a singer and you're having trouble like coming up with melodies on your own and you don't play anything, mess around on a piano. If you have a note reference and you can just compare and contrast notes from that, again, it's just kind of getting out of your own head, getting out of your own habits to get a new perspective, right? Um, and if all that doesn't work, right, this is a go-to trick that I use all the time. I probably should use it more often when dealing with like procrastination and just general like, oh god, this thing seems so daunting in my head and it just seems like this big thing that I have to do and I don't want to just have to try to do it all in one day. I get that kind of way about certain projects like in fact, I'm making a course right now, an online course, and in my mind, it's this thing where it's just like, oh god, it has to be perfect, and it's this huge thing, and it's got to be. So I've built it up in my mind as this like mammoth task that makes me want to like put it off. But then I remind myself of this little trick, which is